Welcome to the Fearless Church podcast. No one wakes up in the morning and thinks to themselves, I hope my life is mediocre today. But so many of us have settled into the routine of our lives and forgotten all the ways that God calls us to live so that we would have an abundant life. It's time for us to wake up from our mediocrity and step into the life that God has called us to live. This is week 3 in our sermon series, Mr. Mediocre.
So yesterday, our staff had this fun thing. Went to this big lake, has all these inflatables on it. I don't know if you've ever seen these things. They're pretty cool. So I love things like that. I have a 6-year-old boy, 3-year-old daughter. So we were going crazy on this stuff. I have a lot of fun on those things. I broke my nose about 8 years ago on an inflatable. Haven't been injured since, until yesterday. We're playing on this stuff, and I got excited. I'm like, okay, I think I can still do flips and stuff. So I did some front flips off of these inflatables. I was diving off of them. It was super fun. So I got really cocky, right? So this is what you do when you go to try to get some air on normal things, like a diving board, right? You take sort of a hop step, and then you put all your weight down and you spring up, right? So inflatables on water, they're really they have a lot of grip on them. So when I took my little hop step this last time, I sort of go to put all my weight down and my feet just slip out, all right? So I'm about 6 foot up, and I just sort of smacked right straight down on the water on my left side. And this bomb went off in my ear, and as I was trying to swim back to shore, because I was like, well, that sounded like crazy, there was just this plane flying over my left ear. It's actually still there right now. So I ruptured my eardrum yesterday. And I don't know if you've ever done that. Has anybody ever done this before? You ruptured your eardrum? It sort of just throws you off. You're just I don't know what's going on over here and over here. Everything sounds different in different places. And so this is super fun. You should try it sometime. You just, I don't know. It's you hear voices and stuff like that. It's kind of cool. I don't know. You should try it. But some of you, when Matt on that video says that perfect belly flop, and talks about jumping off that diving board, the exhilaration, you're no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to jump into community because I will fall and rupture my eardrum metaphorically, and it will all be terrible. I don't like it. And I want to challenge you. Those community group info nights, so we don't have the perfect system here. But if you're worried about getting hurt because of community, please try. Go to that community group info night. There's a guy sitting down in the front. His name's, we'll call him John Wade because that's his name. And he was wearing a shirt right now that says, I like coffee and maybe 5 people, right? And when you think about community, I think of him sometimes when I think of community, he's not in this group of 12 people that's all vibrant, energetic people. He has found community with 1 or 2 people. And that's okay. And that's what John needs. And that when you think of community groups, you might think of these big groups that I like coffee and maybe 2 people. That's okay. Jump in, sign up for the community group info night. It may not, they said it, you might be in one community group forever. You might get in and jump around, but take a step, jump off. You might rupture your eardrum, but it'll be fine. It'll heal. It'll heal in 3 to 4 weeks, they say. So you know what? Should be great. Till then, I'll just listen to the voices. We've been in this sermon series called Mr. Mediocre. We've been talking about putting mediocrity to death. That most of us in our lives, we sort of just are living them passively. But there is a life that Jesus has called us to that is anything but mediocre. And if we're not actively trying to put that to death, it's probably who we're becoming. And we're talking about a lot of things that have, I don't know, for some people in the room, I'm sure it's triggering even to see sort of a headstone, to think about death, even those terms. I don't know, there's a lot of metaphors in the Bible that surround death. And so if you're familiar with church, it might be oh yeah, that's just what it is. But if you're not familiar with church, you might be a little caught off guard. Or if you've recently lost someone, it might be very difficult to sit through these sermons. But I want you to take a step with me and think about if someone you loved, if you were sitting on, like next to someone's deathbed that you love. If you're sitting there and they sort of pull you close and they say, hey, I have something I want you to do. There's something about being close to death that gives people a certain amount of perspective that we don't have normally. They see things clearer. They somehow, even though their time is coming to an end, they see into the future and what might come and what might happen, and they just have these moments that have some weight to it, and they usually challenge you to do something, right? And you know that's called someone's dying wish. There's been about 6 billion movies that have been made about someone having this dying wish that they give to someone. And that person goes to great lengths to meet that, to attain that, to get whatever it is that they're told to do at that deathbed. They go after it with every single thing that they have. This series has been odd for me because some of you know it's been about a year. In October, it'll be a year since my dad passed away. And I helped my mom move a few months ago out of our childhood home to something small that's more manageable for her. And I was thinking about this sermon. I knew I'd be preaching it, and I was thinking about this, and I was like, what if I found a letter from my dad? As we're moving things around, I'm opening drawers to stuff and packing them, if I found this letter written to me from my father, and if he requested something, if he wanted something, if it was his handwriting, his little I couldn't even read it. His handwriting was terrible. These tiny little letters all the time. But if I saw that and he asked me to do something, I think I would do almost anything to go after it. Because I love him. And this is the thing, is that Jesus had a dying wish. He had one. And I want us to look at it today. And with all the soberness that we can, to think about, if you were there when Jesus, this person that most of us say we love, issued this dying wish, like, would you do anything to attain it? I want to look at some of the things he says right before, knowing that he's about to die, with all that clarity, with all that perspective that he has, not just as a human being who's about to die, but as God, as the Son of God who's about to die. He has this moment of clarity, of purpose, of vision, of direction, and he speaks out this dying wish. And I want to look at it today and see how we're doing at fulfilling that wish. So if you have a Bible, I want you to turn to John chapter 17. We're going to look at 3 short verses. I'm going to put the verses here up on the screen. But John chapter 17 is known as the high priestly prayer. If you don't know what in the world that means, that sounds like super religious. It sort of is. Like a high priest was someone who would speak on behalf of the people to God, or would hear from God and then speak to the people. Right? And so as Jesus is praying this prayer in John chapter 17, it's this record of him just talking to God on behalf of the people. He's crying out, knowing that he's about to go to the cross in John chapter 18. He spent the last 4 chapters, 13, 14, 15, 16, saying some of the things that you hear all the time in church. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. I'm the vine, you are the branches. He says all these things to his small group of disciples. Then he goes and he prays to God on behalf of those people and all people, his dying wish. And so I want to zoom in on these 3 verses that are right here. I want to look at it. He says this in John 17. Just as you sent me into the world, I am sending them into the world. Remember, he's talking to God. He's saying, just as you, Father, you sent me into the world, I am sending them into the world. So if he's got this dying wish, part of it is that just like he was sent, he's sending out some people that they would actually go. And then he continues and he says, I give myself as a holy sacrifice for them so they can be made holy. And then he wraps up with this last little sentence here. He says, I'm praying not only for these disciples, these 12 dudes that I've just talked to for 4 chapters, but also for all who will ever believe in me through their message. The thing that sticks out to me about this all who will ever believe in me, is right before Jesus died, you know who he prayed for? Me, you. All who would ever believe in him. How cool is that? Jesus prayed for you. And it's not some like, hey, I prayed for all the he knew you before you were born. Even back then, he knew who you would be. He knew every part of you. He knew every sin that you would commit that he was about to go die for and take the punishment of. He knew it all, and he prayed for you. But it's in this context of what he's wanting to happen, this wish that he has. And if I had to summarize those 3 verses into one statement that summarizes his dying wish, it's this, that the world would be saved through his disciples. That's essentially what he's saying. He's saying, just like I'm sent into the world, I'm sending them. That they would go and that they would give themselves, just like I'm giving myself so they would be made holy. I'm giving myself, they're going to give themselves so that they would be saved. That everyone, I'm praying for all those who would ever be saved through my disciples. And my question is, if Jesus' dying wish is that the world would be saved through his disciples, which is us, you know what the question is. How are we doing at this? Because he didn't just say this in John 17. Some of you memorized it in Sunday school, right? Like Matthew 28, 19 through 20. The last thing Jesus said before he just sort of like floated away, right? Like, go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to observe all things that I've commanded you. And then he promised to be with us and do it. He said, go make disciples. How are we doing at this? And this is the part that I always feel bad doing. But I know that this is a condemnation of myself, just as it is on everyone else. So don't feel bad. I think if I had everyone in the room stand up that can say, I've made a disciple in the past year, I think it'd be pretty sad. You would say, well, I don't even know what it means to make disciples. There's a lot of variance there. Like, well, how do we even know what a disciple really is? Well, you could argue, but if you get down to the root of it, like, how are we doing at making disciples? At fulfilling Jesus' dying wish? I think it's actually, we're doing pretty mediocre. But here's the thing, the key to this, the key to overcoming mediocrity in your life, you know what it is? It's fulfilling that wish. It's going after people who don't yet follow Jesus and spending your entire life investing in them, loving them, caring for them, doing exactly what Jesus prayed for you to do, which is rescue the entire world through the message of his truth. I promise you, if you will jump into trying to make disciples, your life will be anything but mediocre. I guarantee it. And as I look at this passage, I mean, it's so easy to understand. It's unbelievably easy to understand. I'm going to put it up here like, we look at it and we see like, why was Jesus sent? He was sent to rescue the lost in this passage, right? He said, just as you sent me into the world, I'm going to send them into the world. Why was he sent? He was sent to rescue the lost. And he says this himself. The Son of Man came to seek and to save those who are lost. So then why are we sent? It's the same thing. Just as I was sent into the world, I'm sending them into the world. So his mission is our mission. It's to rescue the lost. That's the only thing he wants us to do. So then we ask, well, how did he do it? He gives us the clue, right? He tells us, I gave myself up in John 17. But he doesn't just say it in John 17. He says it in Matthew 20. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. You know these passages. You know that Jesus came to sacrifice himself for us, that his death meant our life. And so if he did it by giving himself, then how do we do it? We got to give up our lives. And Jesus says one more thing that illustrates this. He says, whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake, they will find it. And this is the cute way I would say it. It's a little wordplay, turn of phrase, fun thing. Jesus' dying wish is our death wish. You know what a death wish, somebody, it's in all those action movies. Is Steven Seagal, anybody? You know, the ponytail guy? Some of you don't know who that is. Anyway, he would go into these villages with 7,000 bad guys, and they'd be like, he's on his death wish, right? And then he walks out. And all he had was his ponytail and a small pocket knife or something. And somehow he won, and he overcame all odds. Steven Seagal, the GOAT. But this is what Jesus is calling us to do. He's calling us to, against all odds, give up our entire life for the sake of others. That it's our death wish, right? There's all this death language in Scripture that he calls us to be, we're supposed to be crucified with Christ. That's dying, right? Paul says, I die daily. We're supposed to put to death all the things in our flesh, in our nature, our preferences. Our calendars have to be put to death so that we can actually rescue the lost. Our agendas have to be put to death so we can actually go after them. Because if you don't actively try to go after lost people, you will sit and do every single little thing you want to do for yourself, for your entire life. And you will come to the end of your life, and no one's going to actually write Mr. Mediocre on your grave. But you will not have multiplied your influence for the kingdom of Jesus at all. This is what we're called to do. We're called to make disciples. And this is a reality that making disciples is essential to being a disciple. And I want you to let this sink in for a second. If this is the only thing that Jesus ever called us to do, what it means to be a disciple is to then make disciples. If we're not making disciples, are we disciples? And again, I know the arguments. I've spent years hearing the arguments. So you have to know a certain amount. Before you can make a disciple, you need to know what a disciple is, and you need to know you need to be able to reiterate the gospel. You need to be able to point people down the Romans road. Some of you know what that means. Oh man, so we spend a lot of time trying to learn, and then we die. We didn't make any disciples. Because no one feels ready to make a disciple, right? The reason that only a couple of us would stand up and say we've made disciples in the past year is because most of us are like, I don't know what that means. How do I even do that? That sounds great. I get it. But it's not because I hate people. It's because I'm not comfortable. I don't know where I would even begin if you told me to go make disciples. I have no idea. And for some of you, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk. Let's figure this out. Some of you have been in rooms like these for 20 years. How do you not know? And the reason you don't know is because you've never started trying. Because making disciples is essential to being disciples. It's like the chicken and the egg situation. You've got to start trying it, and then you'll get better at it. I promise you. There's a friend of mine that I've known for, I've known him for probably 4 or 5 years, and in the past 6 months, he has grown in his relationship with Jesus 1 billion times more than he grew in the first 4 years I knew him. You know why? Because he started trying to make disciples. He got this burden on his heart for a couple of people, and he was like, you know what? I feel like I need to ask them to start reading the Bible with me and just seeing what it says and put it into action in their lives. And they don't really necessarily want to follow Jesus or know who Jesus is, but there's something going on in their life where I have a relationship with them, and I'm going to ask them. I'm going to ask them to just meet with me once a week and study the Bible. And you know what he does every single 3 days? He calls me I have no idea what I'm doing. What do I do? And what do I tell these people? And I'm like, oh, well, What's the Trinity? You're going to need to listen to a lot of podcasts this week. If you want to answer that question by next week, you're going to need to understand it in order to be able to help someone else that's actually in a crisis point because they don't understand these things, and it's a big hang up for them. And for anyone who isn't going to have a conversation about the Trinity with someone, you don't need to know how to explain the Trinity. But if you're about to walk into a conversation with someone that you love and you care for, and they're looking to you, and you've put yourself in a relationship where you're trying to make a disciple, you're going to know because you've got to know. That's right. And you will start to grow like mad as soon as you step onto the field. Because for a lot of us, you know that Jesus used this random metaphor about fishing, right? He said, I'm going to make you fishers of men. And what I fear is that so many of us, you're content to come every single Sunday and watch a professional fisherman cast out a line. But you've never gone fishing in your entire life. What if all of us just went fishing? That's right. I think we'd catch a lot more fish. And so my challenge today is to start making disciples. And the question I know you have is, how do we begin making disciples? I'm so glad you asked. I'm going to give you one word, and it's going to radically transform your life and all the lives of your children. Just kidding. This is something, and it's something that I stole. It's not even mine. I stole it from a church up north. They use this word when they talk about how to just teach people simply how to begin this process, how to begin investing in people, and whether they're believers or unbelievers, how do you just start making intentional investment in people's lives? And they use the word bless. They just say, bless them. Bless them. We sang a song called The Blessing this morning. It's a word that we use in church. We don't necessarily use in normal day-to-day talk, like be blessed, brother. That's a church thing. That's not something you say to your coworker on Monday, right? That's just not, whatever. It's a church thing, but we're going to use this church word, and we're going to talk about how do we begin making disciples. We're going to use this word bless, and you'll see as they pop up, it'll be B.L.E.S.S, and that's it. All you got to remember is bless them. Be blessed, not stressed, all right? Here you go. Number one, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to begin with prayer. So you're going to think about a person. You're going to think about their name, and you're going to pray for them. And you know what's crazy? Somebody else already prayed for them a long, long time ago in John 17, and his name was Jesus. You're not alone in your prayer. You're going to pray for them, and it's going to do two things. Number one, I promise you, because I've seen it happen, something will change in them. And it will open a door to have a conversation because prayer works. But the second thing it's going to do, I think, is actually more important. You're going to start to care about them if you pray for them. If you pray for the same person every single day for 20 seconds, it doesn't even have to be 20 minutes. It could be 20 seconds you pray for them. You're going to start routinely thinking about them. You're going to care about them. Because those 20 seconds just keep happening and happening and happening and happening and happening, and you make it a routine, and you begin with prayer, and you start to care about them, and when God opens this little crack of a door, because that's how cool he is, you will care enough to step through it. But the second thing you're going to do is you're going to listen. What that means is you got to make yourself available for them. And you have to actually listen. You have to talk less. Because what we normally want to do, and this is what's been taught a lot, and there's nothing wrong with this strategy specifically, but I think in our culture it doesn't really work. We begin with prayer, and then we go, and we say, did you know that when you die, you're going to burn in hell? And it's like, whoa, it's weird. That didn't work. They didn't respond positively to that. I'm not sure why. But you know what? I bowled them. BL. Whatever. Just kidding. That's it doesn't, you got to listen. You got to make yourself available to them. And sometimes it's not going to be super convenient. You're not going to have time, but when they call, you answer. There's someone that in Grace and I, my wife and I's life, that anytime they call, anytime they text and say, do you want to hang out? I do not care what is on our calendar. I am there. We have canceled on our friends and been like, hey, we were literally on our way to hang out. Sorry, they called. Because I've made myself available to them. You make yourself available. After that, you do a third thing, which is my favorite thing. This is my favorite one to do. You eat. You share meals with them. How many of you have eaten this week? Like, people eat food, right? It's like, I get together with people all the time, and they're like, oh, sorry to take a bunch of time out of your day. I'm like, I had to eat. I might as well eat with you. And this is an easy thing. It's not weird. It's weird to ask someone, and I know it's weird to ask someone like, hey, will you come to a Bible study with me? Will you come to church with me? Will you read the Bible and pray together with me? That could be weird depending on who it is. It is not weird for you to say, hey, do you want to eat food? Maybe say it, that sounded weird. Like phrasing it that way is maybe not good, but like, do you want to grab lunch with me? Would you like to get some food with me? Like it takes a little bit of a step, but it's not that much because I guarantee you they eat food, right? So just share meals with them. That's what you do. And then at some point, you got to serve them. As you're listening to them and you're eating with them, these two things continue to happen. And you may not get to this for a while. You're continuing to pray. You're continuing to make yourself available. You're eating with them. You're spending time with them. And at some point, they're going to open their mouth and say, it'd really be great if. Or, we've been having this struggle. Or they just say something, I really like cake. Whatever they say. And all of a sudden, you serve them. You take note of it, maybe you write it down when you're with them, and then you drop something off at their doorstep. It's like, hey, I heard you say one time that you really like Harry Potter, and so I got you this little bobblehead Harry figurine, and I just left it on your... That's a stupid example, but I guarantee you what they will feel is not like, oh, that was really weird. They'll feel like, oh, I'm seen. I'm loved. They took time for me. They value me. I'm important to them. And you serve them and you're generous with your time. And every time they call and want to hang out, you drop everything off your schedule and you hang out with them. And they realize, I'm not just some project, because again, these people are not projects. They're people that Jesus has prayed for years ago that he's going to use you to reach. And they're going to feel the love, not just from you, they're going to feel it from Jesus. I promise you. And at some point, you're going to get to the last S here, which is you've got to share your story. And if you don't know what that means, you don't know how to do that, go listen to last week's sermon. It was killer, right? Like it was unreal. If you were here, Matt preached his butt off, all right? And it was so good. And he gave us this exercise that if you did it this week, I promise you it blessed you. I promise you that 5H exercise was amazing. It's not about sharing your story like, well, when I was 7, I walked down to the front of a church and I prayed a prayer. No. It's about what Jesus is doing, not just in your life way back when, but what he's doing in your life today, because he's not done writing your story, because your story being written is the ending to someone else's story. Because it's weird. He prayed a long time ago that there's going to be a bunch of people that are reached through his message, which is made known to everyone through us. And he's constantly rewriting people's stories with your story. And when that moment happens, that you have that door cracked open for you to share what Jesus is doing in your life, I promise you, there's going to be some miracles that happen. Some people are going to trust in Jesus that you thought, no way. But it's because you've been praying for them. And in the hands of God, a little prayer can unearth some things in someone else's heart. And you've been listening to them. And you've been eating food with them and spending time together. You've been serving them generously and loving them. And when you share what's going on in your life, it's not some random guy like me that they hear like, well, Jesus died. It's not bullet points of a story. Jesus died and he cares about you. They're going to feel Jesus' love through you. And it's a lot harder to deny Jesus in the face of your friend who loves you and cares for you than it is from a guy like me talking from a stage that you don't know. Your story matters. Share what God is doing in your life, and I'm pretty sure it'll be used to transform theirs. Way back at the beginning of when God chose his people, he chose this guy named Abraham. You've probably heard of him, Father Abraham. Jesus is in the line of Abraham. He's the father of the Jewish nation. There's all sorts of stuff that goes into it. But he called Abraham for this specific reason. He said, God blesses his people to be a blessing. He said to Abraham, in you, the nations will be blessed. Through you, the nations will be blessed. And Abraham didn't understand really what that meant. But God knew that he was blessing Abraham so that a long time later, Jesus would come. And then Jesus wasn't the end of it. He was the continuation of it that gets down to you and me. And God still, he blesses his people in order to be a blessing to others. That's what we are here for, to be a blessing to other people. This is Jesus' dying wish, that the world will be saved through us. It's our job. I'm telling you, just go bless somebody this week. And usually this is where I would pray. But not today. Today there's some homework. And the great news is there's study hall right now. I'm going to give you 5 minutes of reflection time for you to do these 3 things, to write down a name, to pray for that person, begin with prayer. I'm giving you the B right now. And then think of ways to make yourself available, share a meal, or meet a need. And I highlighted this one because I want you to spend the majority of your time on this one. This one can be difficult. Thinking of someone can be difficult, but hopefully as I've been talking, you've been thinking of someone. Someone has come to mind. It's not just me bringing someone to mind. That's what we would say. The Holy Spirit has brought someone to mind for you to just write down a name, pray for that person, and take maybe the first 90 seconds to do that. And then brainstorm. Think of ways to make yourself available to them, to share a meal. You can literally take that time to text message them. I don't care if you pull out your phone. I know you might just be scrolling Instagram. That's fine. But take out your phone, and I challenge you guys to just text somebody. Maybe it's that you work with. Maybe it's someone that's a parent of another kid at school. And maybe phrase it better than like, you want to eat food? But like, invite them to spend some time with you this week and start blessing them. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, starting now.
Thanks again for tuning in with us today. Here at Fearless Church, we believe that every message is a chance for us to take new ground in our walks with Jesus. To help you in that direction, we have some discussion questions in our podcast notes that you can think through on your own, or even better, talk through with some friends, a family member, or a spouse. In those notes, we've also included information on our service times and our location. We hope you'll join us again soon on the Fearless Church podcast.